Alan Kite, known as the Midlands Ripper, was convicted in 2000 of the unalivings of 20-year-old Samuel Paul and 30-year-old Tracy Turner, whom he unalived in December 1993 and March 1994. After his convictions, investigators announced the suspicions that Kite could have been behind a number of unsolved unalivings of workers across Britain in the 1980s and 1990s. He was apprehended due to the groundbreaking investigations of a wider police inquiry named Operation Enigma, which was launched in 1996 in response to the unalivings of Paul, Turner and a large number of other workers. Kite was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years imprisonment for the unalivings of Paul and Turner. Operation Enigma, which reviewed the unsolved unalivings of more than 200 workers and vulnerable women across Britain since 1986, continues to influence police investigations today and was described as the first step towards the creation of a violent crime database in Britain. In February 2023, Kite was further convicted of historical offences against a 9-year-old boy, which he committed a violent campaign of indecency and threats which began in late 1980s and continued for 5 years. Kite is imprisoned at HM Prison Onley as of March 2023 and continues to refuse to accept his guilt for any serious crimes of which he's been convicted, except for one unaliving which was verified with a DNA link to him and which he eventually accepted his culpability in. Kite was born in Tittinsur, Stoke-on-Trent on the 7th of July 1964. He grew up in Stafford. Kite was said to be a stickly youngster who suffered from severe asthma and his family doted on him constantly. After leaving school, he worked in a series of odd jobs and eventually became a lorry driver. He was described as a loner and was said to have a violent hatred of women and an unusual interest in women workers. He was rarely seen with women and often lived in hostels or bed and breakfasts. He would regularly travel hundreds of miles across Britain, telling acquaintances he was looking for work. He was known at several hospitals and surgeries as he would seek medication for a number of medical complaints as he drove lorries around the country. Kite's itinerant lifestyle allowed him to travel the country in order to scout out women workers, his chosen victims. He would in particular frequent motorway service stations. He would ask for services from them and attack and rob them. He was also a prolific conman, involving himself in petty fraud, in cheating car owners by claiming he'd retuned their cars when he hadn't. He would frequently replace his own personal car, whilst also using cars belonging to his would-be customers to troll the motorways for women. He would occasionally drive as many as 1,000 miles in his customers' cars, then return them to the unwitting customers. In January 1991, the Staffordshire Newsletter reported that Kite had been convicted of stealing more than £700 from his father's bank account to feed his gambling addiction. Kite, living in Rickenscote Avenue in Stafford, went on the run once his father had discovered the theft, and was reported as a missing person prior to being apprehended by police. During this time, Kite was also convicted of deceiving a couple whose car had broken down out of £35, claiming he was going to buy them a spare part, and also for driving off without paying for petrol at a garage. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of deception, 1 count of theft, and 1 count of making off without payment, and was also found guilty of failing to surrender to bail. He was given 2 years probation. His defence claimed that, following an examination by a psychiatrist, the clinician had found nothing clinically wrong with him. Kite claimed to have remorse and stated, "I have given up gambling and enrolled in an addiction control centre." In December 1993, Kite picked up 20-year-old worker from Samuel Paul from Birmingham's Balsall Heath Red Light District. She was a single parent. She was reported missing on the 4th of December and was missing for more than 3 weeks before her partially clothed body was noticed by a horse rider on the 31st of December. Paul's remains were lying in a water-filled ditch near a lay-by outside of Swinford, Leicestershire. This was 38 miles from where she was last seen in Birmingham. The site was near Junction 20 of the M1 motorway. Because of the remoteness of the location, there was no CCTV evidence, nor were there any people living nearby who could provide information. All of Paul's possessions had been stolen. Detectives originally focused their investigation on Paul's boyfriend. A key witness was a woman who had seen a man in a brown-coloured Ford Sierra car driving through Swinford in early December, with a woman in the back seat who appeared to be unalived. The witness had previously worked as a pathologist and had experience in examining unalived bodies. The woman was sitting bolt upright and had strange marks on her face. The car was covered in mud and the driver appeared to not want to be seen, pulling a hat over his face. When Paul was found unalived on the 31st of December, the witness insisted to police that the unalived woman she had seen being driven around was Paul. On the 2nd of March 1994, Central Television broadcast a reconstruction of Paul's unaliving. Kite saw the broadcast and fueled his desire to attack another victim. Shortly after the broadcast, he abducted 30-year-old Tracy Turner from Hilton Park Services on the M6 motorway. Turner regularly solicited customers from the motorway service stations across the country. Turner had a disability. She was virtually deaf. She was found dead the next day in Bitterswell near Lutterworth, 52 miles from where she was last seen. Similarly to Paul, she had been dumped near the M1 motorway, this time near to Junction 19. She had been hard, stripped of her clothing and strangled. She was dumped by the side of the road and was found about 6 miles from where Paul had been found dead. Police concluded that she had been transported to the location by car and dumped by the side of the road by the killer. Initially, the police made no connection between the new discovery and the murder of Samuel Paul 3 months earlier. The first suspect to be questioned was a man who was believed to have been seen speaking to Turner at Hilton Park Services. His car's registration was checked. He was traced to Glasgow, but after speaking with him, investigators found no evidence to link him to the murder. He was released. 2 days after the murder, Kite was seen at a service station posing as a newspaper reporter. He told staff he was conducting an investigation into work. Initial inquiries into the murders of Paul and Turner yielded few clues, and Kite was not apprehended during this period. It is known that Kite also attacked a second woman in 1994. That March, he again picked up an S-worker from Balsall Heath area of Birmingham and drove to a dark area before pulling out a Stanley knife and holding it to her neck. He ordered her to give him her belongings and remove her clothes, but when she begged for her life and told him that she was 3 months pregnant, Kite told her to get out, throwing her clothes after her. The victim reported the attack to the police. Kite was not apprehended for this offence. On the 22nd of April 1994, it was reported in the Staffordshire Sentinel that a man had been charged with kidnapping Kite from his Stanford home and robbing him of £55. At this stage, it was still not known that Kite had murdered and attacked several victims. In January 1995, Kite, still not known to have committed the murders and attacks on women, pleaded guilty at Magistrates' Court to 2 counts of theft, having stolen a vehicle which he said he was working on for a client, also stealing an £800 welding equipment set, after lying and claiming he had already given the equipment back to the rightful owners. At this time, Kite, recorded as being of Plant Crescent, Stafford, was also charged with a number of other petty offences. In December 1997, Kite committed a violent attack and R-word of a woman at knife point in Weston-super-Mare. The victim had been staying in the same hostel as Kite and was attacked by him there at night. She managed to escape and report the incident to the police. Police were dispatched to the hostel where they arrested Kite. Kite was found guilty of the attack at trial and sentenced to 8 years imprisonment. At the time, police in Britain were often ineffective at solving the murders of workers. The victims received markedly less sympathy from detectives. Their murders were rarely featured prominently in the media, and S-workers were often blamed for making themselves vulnerable. In the 6 months after Paul's death, 4 other S-workers, including Tracy Turner, were murdered across Britain, and Leicestershire Constability detectives asked for a cross-force investigation. Many of Kite's crimes were committed across the force boundaries, and there were often difficulties in running investigations into such crimes and sharing resources between forces. The increasing number of unexplained worker deaths in the 90s eventually led to the creation of the 1996 Operation Enigma, which was intended to review the unsolved murders of up to 207 women dating back to 1986, which were committed against S-workers or women who could have been mistaken for S-workers. The operation was run by National Crime Facility in Hampshire and made use of tracking and data analysis techniques from Canada, as well as new forensic techniques which detectives hoped would upgrade crime scene samples. Enigma was one of the first steps toward a database for violent crime analysis, and many of its features influenced present-day police investigations. Detectives concluded that many murders of S-workers in the 1990s appeared to be committed by the same person and investigated the theory of a serial killer or serial killers could be at large. 14 murders were in particular said to have had similarities, and Enigma concluded that up to 4 serial killers could be at large. Many of the unsolved murders Enigma investigated were clustered in the Midlands and Merseyside. information was shared between police forces around Britain. Detectives concluded that the similar murders of Paul and Turner were likely linked. When Kite was arrested in December 1997 for the attack on the woman in Weston-super-Mare, his DNA was taken as part of standard procedure when arresting individuals suspected of a crime. His DNA profile was uploaded onto the National DNA Database in March 1998, which revealed a match to a sample taken from the scene of Tracy Turner's murder in 1994. Both Turner's and Paul's investigations were reopened by Enigma investigators. Kite was interviewed by these detectives, who decided not to disclose that they had found a DNA link in order to see what his defence would be. He subsequently denied ever using S-workers. He denied ever pretending to be a newspaper reporter at Hilton Park Services, but CCTV had captured him doing it. He then revealed that he owned a brown Ford Sierra car, the same type as had been seen by the witness transporting a body near where Samuel Paul was found dead. Soon after, Kite was charged with the murders of both Turner and Paul. At trial, forensic experts stated the likelihood of the DNA found on Turner belonging to anyone other than Kite was 1 in 33,000 million. Kite's fellow prison inmates testified that he'd boasted of the murders while imprisoned for his 1997 attack. They stated that he'd told them that he'd killed Turner because she laughed at him during S, infuriating him. The prosecution asserted that the two murders were linked by type, origin, and disposal. Kite was put in a last-minute defence that the reason his DNA was found on Turner was because he regularly used S-workers, despite his earlier declaration that he'd never used them, and that he had had consensual S with her saying, he was found guilty for both murders by unanimous decision. He was given a minimum 25-year tariff. In news coverage of his offences, Kite was labelled as the Midlands Ripper, in part because he was also suspected of having multiple other victims. Operation Enigma had investigated Kite's potential links to some of the other 200-plus cold cases it was reinvestigating. Because Kite lived an itinerant lifestyle and drove across the country, it was believed that he could be responsible for other unsolved murders across Britain. In prison, Kite allegedly boasted of killing 12 women in total, which the detective in charge of the investigations of the two known murders said could be true. He is said to have stated to inmates that there are reports in the media that detectives feared that Kite could have more victims than Peter Sutcliffe. After his conviction in 2000, Leicestershire Police took an unusual step of issuing every police force in Britain with his details and tape recording of his voice. Detectives, in particular, noted that Kite was not yet known to have committed any attacks between 1994 and 1997, and stated that they suspected that there could be other unknown victims between these dates. There were several murders that took place when Kite was known to have been in the vicinity, and it was revealed after Kite's 2000 conviction that detectives were already planning to speak to him about such murders. Many were committed near motorways, or the victims' bodies were found near motorways, similarly to Paul and Turner. The murder victims announced by investigators as possible victims of Kite were Yvonne Coley, Birmingham, May 1994, Gail Whitehouse, Wolverhampton, October 1990, Gail Downs, Wolverhampton, February 1991. Kite was working in the area at the time. Lynn Trenholm, Chester, June 1991, Barbara Finn, Coventry, 1992, Natalie Perman, Norwich, November 1992, Carol Clark, Gloucestershire, March 1993. Kite was living in Weston-super-Mare at the time, 20 miles from her flat in Bristol. Dawn Shields, Sheffield, May 1994. Kite had recently moved to a residence near the place she was abducted from, and the murder was said to have all the hallmarks of a Kite killing. Sharon Harper, Grantham, July 1994. Julie Finley, Liverpool, August 1994. Kite was also said to have had detailed knowledge of the area where she was found. Tracy Wild, Glasgow, November 1997. A link between Kite and these murders could not be proven at the time, as there had been no DNA evidence acquired in these cases. However, Enigma detectives believed that Kite was responsible for other murders. Leicestershire Police Assistant Chief Constable David Coleman stated, Operation Enigma concluded that there were notable similarities between the murders of Whitehouse, Trenholm, Pearman, Clark and Shields. Some of the suggested links between Kite and these murders were later disproven. In 2017, Norfolk police revealed that they had DNA evidence in the Natalie Perman case, and in 2019, another man was convicted of Wilde's murder. Kite was originally also linked to the murder of Celine Figard in 1995, but another man was later convicted of the killing. Investigators already have fingerprint evidence in the Trahome case. In April 2023, a 66-year-old man was arrested and then bailed for the Carol Clark case following the discovery of new and significant information by police. The murder of Dawn Shields was covered in a 2013 documentary as part of the Killers Behind Bars, The Untold Story series. The presenter, David Wilson, spoke to detectives who were on the Shields case. They also visited the site where she was found. Kite continued to be regularly linked in the press to many of these murders and to other unsolved killings. Kyle had an appeal against his conviction rejected in February 2001. In 2013, it was announced that Kite had failed in an appeal against the length of his 25 minimum sentence. Kite had argued that the sentence was too long. It was revealed that Kite had accepted his culpability in relation to Turner's murder, but continued to deny any involvement in the murder of Paul. The judge said that he had not made enough progress in prison to qualify for a reduction in his sentence. Because that appeal was rejected, Kite will remain in prison until at least 2025. In February 2023, Kite was further found guilty of essaying an underage boy in the years leading up to his two known murders. Kite began to target the boy in the late 1980s and continued to regularly attack him for 5 years, luring the 9-year-old boy to his house and attacking him after promising him toys. It was heard that each attack saw increased violence and threats against him and his family if he told anyone, and that Kite would punch, choke, kick and taunt the boy. Kite also R-worded the child on at least 2 occasions. After the victim felt finally able to come forward to testify, Kite was found guilty in 2023 of 4 counts of indecency with a child, 3 counts of attempting to choke, 2 of indecent assault and 2 of buggery. Kite accepted he was capable of extreme violence and denied everything, and his justification being that the victim has got no reason to make these allegations. During cross-examination, Kite similarly refused to accept that he'd killed Sam Paul, but admitted murdering Tracy Turner on the grounds that she had pestered him into finishing a meal on a motorway service station. It was revealed during the 2023 trial that Kite was now imprisoned at HM Rye Rail. Kite's 2023 convictions were widely publicised and also led to further speculation of the possibility of him having claimed more murder victims. On the 11th of May 2023, Kite was given a 3rd life sentence and additionally ordered to serve a minimum of 10 years and 8 months imprisonment, meaning he will ultimately not be liable for parole until late 2033. By this point, Kite had been moved to HM Prison only. In 2001, criminal profiler Paul Britton, who worked with detectives on the case, released a book titled Picking Up the Pieces, which included a section on the case. In 2007, author Nigel Cawthon published a book which featured a chapter on Operation Enigma. In 2009, author Vanessa Howard published a book which featured a chapter noting possible links between Kite and the unaliving of Birmingham S worker Janine Downs in 1991. In 2012, author Stephen Wade included a chapter on Kite in his book. In 2013, Channel 5 broadcast a documentary with a high-profile criminologist, Dave Wilson, which covered the unaliving of Dawn Shields, one of Kite's suspected victims. The episode was part of the Unalivers Behind Bars, The Untold Story series and was focused on possible links between unsolved crimes and Stephen Griffiths, although Wilson concluded links to Griffiths were unlikely. Wilson spoke to investigators who were on the Shields case and visited the site she was found. In 2019, Quest released a documentary on Kite titled Alan Kite, the Midlands Ripper. It was released as part of the British Police Our Toughest Cases series and was the 5th episode of Series 1. It featured interviews with detectives who investigated Kite. In 2020, retired detective Jackie Moulton released a documentary on Kite on CBS Reality as part of The Real Prime Suspect series. The episode was the 4th episode in Series 2.